OI and GHTVs spamming when they're offering these Sagish film and other Sagish Google when they're first of all these two entities, whether reason or code words, considerable as quite the sister to Nazism. Hideousness, quite sustainable over that. Repetition, because when born in themselves, they are hijack corpses, whether they're their own corpses. Directly, a reason considerable rhetorical, whether expression of whether rhetorical expression of no fun, whether first of trouble to also sort of. The Nazis wouldn't assist. There's a this usually when I perform a recent about 2 videos instance ago, it was whether before thereof can be considered as quite a decent proper considerable as quality performance. And it takes me to perform it, whether it was my performance and whether it took me. Whether it took more to perform it, and whether just whether reason or just whether their reason and whether reason just and whether took whether took me to perform it. The Nazis will rest their hypocrites. It doesn't offer much. The feminazis generate. They don't try to deny too much. They don't try to starve against their own kids, but whether reason about it, whether. But give they try to instigate for perceptiveness from amongst men, and they are really happy murderers, and something is fundamentally wrong with the feminazis. They might want to just simply get a blood sacrifice to the Prince Charming. Prince Charming has other side. He might be also Wolverine, and he might be Hitler too. Third time is a charm. Third nuke is waiting, and Gandalf the Grey returns become Gandalf the Shy, whether recent or minor repronunciation becomes Gandalf the Shy. It's probably predetermined, guys. As much as how does charisma work, right? It's probably a lot to do with emotion, and emotion is something that's so strong that the person carries with it forever. At least the acting person, and whether the person being, whether the enterprise there, whether the character there being, and whether also a bit on character, much more into whether much more enthusiastic of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be strong. So strong ties with descriptions or opinions. Whether mentioned at the public side is strong, it can still be strong, but not mentioned at the public side. Whether at public side, and whether at public side, and whether at public side strong, and whether reason there, and whether as strong. But as long as the result becomes down data removed, then there it is on whether recent, and whether then the down were removed, and society become restored. 1960 generation can be marked as one of the most irresponsible generations. It is the most collegiantized. Check out the mess. Right, after the Great Generation gone, simply the stuff gotten way worse. I think overall, we don't have humans. They're spasm. So we don't have humans. Whether recent phrase there can be considered as a reserved. It's as much overused with the statement, whether with recent statements whether with recent statements, and it soon becomes tactically countered by the Nazism. The Nazis became more they're very dominant. Even with this Gordon Freeman situation, where rescuing this planet, and they're very established. They're undermatching it, play it out like it's still 8th century. There isn't even too much of a Hitler force right now. So how it is going to be done is probably done in Gordon Freeman way. We somehow get someone join on our side, give the nukes back, and counter the 7 billion. The low class can be still potent, right? It actually works out in how the flag of Israel reflects there's another triangle. That's the other side. This Rousseau's Nazism is considerable foe, right? Because it's whether it's a considerable foe. It can whether it is also able to be an opponent of the alliance, whether the coalition between the righteous, whether of the righteous forces and the sovereign party. Alien technology, with our drones growing at exponential speed, it can be on par still, whether reason they're still on par with the second phase, so not sort of the completion as much phase, and whether more to the completion, whether to the next level or evolution level, whether to the next Desu on level, or whether to the next Desu on revolution, whether to the next Desu on level of Zomberist tumor spread. The tumor, it covers the surface, and whether tumor covers, it's a surface sort of shaped, and whether surface item, and whether that's on item, whether that's on item, whether also on item, and it, so it's sort of squared. So it's that is of whether reason just there to whether reason there of just to whether reason there just whether to whether reason there just and whether to whether reason there just to whether reason there just and whether so it's also whether therefore and whether it's exponential. So the Aryan technology exponential growth may be just on par, will be on par to the also exponential growth, and whether to the exponential growth of the tumor cancer. That itself is sort of considerable, whether that's the zircon, whether that's the Zomberist technology. Does it paint really clarity right now? The reason why a lot of the females, and whether also include some of the females, sort of lesser with the quote mark, and whether more up to comparative, even lesser, whether more of lesser, whether also whether more of lesser quote mark females be measured by year conceded. What does it really measure? Do the females sort of have another controller inside of them? And sometimes those activate more of, and whether they always are constant considerable, whether also considerable, whether constant operating, and sometimes the net result turns into whether it becomes those. So sometimes they're helping, sometimes they're off, and the entire notification as if they were simply doing it right. And sometimes there's oddity, and it determines the female feature. Probable. One way to find out. Ship me 50 California gals from, that may be a whole other female group. That's sort of comparison to whether comparisons to probable to group of. Here's how to handle if I'm sure it's second, and how do I still have sort of this expansive private life, whether comparative, right? Whether as public life, whether it still have this, whether instead of both locations there, whether the locations there, whether there instance of whether the locations there of with the usage of whether with the word life instead with operational programs, and whether also other words of whether also whether name contests here, and whether also description contests of from which and whether to probable also for whether reason there to found probable for also suitable for whether to probable to also to could be is I have two different modes. It could be a solution. So over there I'm fewer second, and over here I'll be certain character. I may not specifically whether be sort of like Hitler, and I may not know exactly the picture, and I'm supposed to be operating this way because anyways we're beings, not so much knowing, right? Although I'm offering a mode of sort of command this from a neutral perspective, and in that way it's almost like cheating. It's almost like hacking, right? To probable, and from this operating of a recent to considerable as an expression of whether and minor rather than whether, and whether there rather and whether for presentation purpose thereof, and reason whether and there whether for and whether there for presentation purpose mainly of, and whether for presentation and whether the purpose of, and whether for presentation purpose thereof, reason thereof as much of a considerable as, and whether described as and whether considered as a rush. A different version, whether a version not as with of a Russian, whether not as with of what, whether not as of the probable of our comparison to would be better. I'm sort of able to operate from the void and sort of have a neutral taking onto this and have predetermined knowledge about what's going to happen and stuff. Or not so much, and whether not so much of and also have a factor of say of certain things, or whether and rather whether reason there and minor rather and whether first of, and whether recent and minor rather and whether as with reason there of sort of a lot of guidance is offered from us, and we sort of are counselors, high command counselors, whether high counselors, and whether chief of joint staff, and whether counselors from councils of chiefs. There to cook work out of may not be best, may not be comparative as reason that considerable as rhetorical expression to probable to view, and be offering a lot of guidance to the fellow beings, whether to a lot of teammates, allies, comrades, intellectuals, workers, etc. The new age is coming, guys. I can almost smell it and whether sense it, or whether I can notice it. The new era is coming. I'm sort of unstoppable, because it's almost like which is stronger, a rock or wood, or whether rock or plantation, whether a rock or tree. As lots of the monuments indicate, the tree can outcome rock. it represents the forces of nature. How is one, and that's quite strong out there. And check out how the tree manages to simply hug around the rocks at the anchor core or anchor wall and somehow triumph through the passing of time, and not just through the passing of the might be through the passing of the meteors seasons, or whether it's sort of known as pattern or as some other seasons, or whether that's sort of a not trust, whether not quite patternal season of meteors, and whether recent season of whether recent and whether by outcome in the sort of the discontinuation, whether the passing of occupants, whether and also whether occupant is that the trees are, and whether the plantations are able to triumph the other group that had once of a glory, and their glory will pass, and soon it becomes commonly discussed as the group that's sort of in a way left over, not, and whether also whether descended, whether transcended. In that way, the descension sort of transcends. And notice in there, right? There's some problems with, and whether there's some problems with Romanian English, with the words completely. There's a lot of problem with it. After all, Romania is a Nazism hub, for goodness sakes. So whether it is the Nazism hub of the mass amount of Nazis. Suppose someone was speaking to a Nazi, they wouldn't sort of the verb word there probably deserves certain changes, whether suitable for another word to signify there onto and reflect of the in situation, whether the situation there, and the Nazis wouldn't be called a Nazi directly, because the Nazis wouldn't understand sort of. They already sort of goner, whether they since came first day they're goners. These are some memorization nearli based mad doctor factual machines. I have pretty artistic probably on whether I'm feeling great at drawings and pretty wise, probably strategic in placements and holding positions, the namely of whether thereof and whether reason thereof, and yet why and whether while those ones, whether reasons and whether while those ones, whether that's through, whether that's on while, whether reason there that's through on while, and whether on while, whether while, and whether reason there just, and whether while, those ones have facture a lot more. The cases of categories, they think a lot more. They think whether reason there, they think a lot more. And those can be considerable there of whether they're of on which and whether of on or whether of whether reason thereof, whether recent thereof considerable as a change of subject. There are the cases of the me gang members, which a lot of probably considerable the whether of whether it's probable for the considerable and whether reason there another, and whether probable of considerable and whether reason there is probable to considerable of reason there to countable as a minor repetition, whether minor repronunciation thereof. A lot of the extremist gurus can be considered as the me gang members. Since the first day, ever terrorism spot, me factor churn designate towards everything. Does lamerism, being a plain useless, doesn't care about society, doesn't have cool swag. Name a single wild creature doesn't have cool swag. They all register some cool and swag points. These ones don't pay the upkeep, but they've been getting paid. They've been getting from the social upkeeps they saved up, been getting a whole lot. And that's a case of a lot of the moderate growers, or whether the cases of a lot of the growers. And that's the on case of the opposites. '1960 can be considered as a pretty worse generation, right?
lots of helicopter parents, they don't raise kids right, they take irresponsibility. How do they even falter and join this modernity program? There should be heavier resistance, more placement investigation. Overall, they're not witty. And what the reason they're whether rather and whether whether reason there and whether and rather and whether reason there and whether rather and whether reason there and whether and rather and whether reason there and whether and rather and whether reason there and whether and rather plenty irresponsible, whether plentiful irresponsibleness, whether in the absence of responsible manner. One could layer out, it was sort of being in hearing discussion, probably consider both whether discussion and whether soon of, and whether reason here and whether hearing discussion of can be, and whether reason there also minor rather, and whether also moderate rather, and whether also rather to probable of each, and whether to probable of, and whether minor rather to probable of also to be of considerable as countered by as advanced level, and whether advanced level discussion of, as this was, it had to be certain cycles, and it will result to reverse and comes, and whether in reverse of Adolf Hitler, whether they will come to a greater phase, but in ways different, whether reason there, but different results, there will always be a savior. Like how there's a plumber problem, the plumber is going to come, or the other choice, this house or the residence gets abandoned. And it becomes whether it's sort of a terrorism, whether previously terrorism comes out, whether both, and whether reason also, whether either, and whether the probable to both there, to probable, and whether to there, whether to reason there, whether to of both there, and whether to both to, and whether to of both there, and whether to probable of whether could be of.
And then it will be whether it will be out of sort of first niceness that such becomes determinist way, and probably also considerable as accepted. Probably something worthy of consideration. And again, whether considerable as advanced level discussions of, whether advanced level discussion thereof, whether also whether advanced level discussion of the probable of which, and whether the probable of also suitable of.
Reason there of the recent issues, and whether the recent topic there's proper additional mentions, whether also other descriptions and other points, and whether also other mentions proper of also to be of, and whether recent and whether another whether to proper of, and whether to proper from which, and whether to proper on, and whether to proper from which, and whether it's proper of to also suitable of. And whether reason to proper of to also to suitable to proper of to also to could be of, and whether to proper of to could be of to proper of which, and whether to proper of to also to could be of, and whether to proper of to could be of. If there's more topics, if there's more discussion venues, it will certainly assist our efforts. It will help this program, and whether it will provide more interaction. There would come from, then whether they would result in whether they will yield, and whether they would result, whether they would, and whether another, whether they would another, and whether recent, and whether they would, and whether another, whether reasons, and whether they would result to more, whether reason there they would, whether and minor rather, and whether rather, and whether they would also result, or whether they would another, and whether they would result to more of a fancy style, whether more performance. Notice at the level of as for expression purpose. So there's frustration out there. There's hectic amount of quizzes out there. I'm regularly given nothing. I'm given glue paste. This whole stuff is being a giant mess. How could someone start sort of a group and generate this exodus, this revelation, and let their own people starve to death, and then have all this vicious criminals poured in and speak, there will be a second Jeebus? This planet could have been the whole degen. There might not be a God. There might be a chosen one, whether there might be convergence of forces, there might be cases. We know there's sort of not a creator, that's a God, like a being that's here. And the legality Nazis track some amount of this realism data. How could this be neglected and actually played out like it's totally real? There might be a factor, it's a sort of a worthy test, it's drawn on to the basis that these ones must be innocent. The females, reason that can be considered as generalization of, and some of those victim groups must be victim groups, and whether are also innocent, and lots of other, whether also with along with other description, whether along with other treatments, and whether treats, and whether treatments, and whether first of whether also to come simultaneous, and whether to just whether it also to come before, whether it also to come first of. It's stacks on which, if it doesn't work, so if it collapses, then we will find. That's probably how on the concurrent, whether on the functional level, we will operate as. It will not be so much announced. And I'll compare it to lots of others, whether to the usuals, whether to usual, it will not be there. The whole place will transfer to the degens. Now how it's going to be get back? We have to nuke it back. Already there's so much disunity, there's not even our guys. Where is we? There's Fuzi 2, there's Roman Adbo, 3 guys, 2 guys. They can't even cover the 24-hour clock. This is being a global degeneracy. There may not be a sort of this version, whether there's God, but there's certainly this chosen one. There's solutionators, there's helpers. A lot of hazardous being done. The whole Bible is written in a slow way. So how is somebody supposed to fight? I have to pick up some pharaoh instincts or something. I have to pick up certain other language style. This is a complete chiselment. It's a contempt. It's a sister to some kind of both insane, whether also this traumatized, majorly traumatized hover ghost. A lot of the actions from the feminazis even reflect this. They are even helping in a way. Right? They're really, whether much of helping considerable. No, whether reason there, and also with whether also with the very much, whether it's a proper of the very much helping. I'm sort of, no person is going to stay there and, hey guys, I have to reply in these formats, and already there's grammar and spelling check on everyone. These are actually crazy. Why is one going so reasonable and written a Bible in this format? It's going to absolutely allocate. Wait, there's selfishness involved there, right? Selfishness along with some absolute dramatism. It's being this and knowing what kindness is. So start introduces as kindness and set it to a sort of social custom level. Now Boromir are going to be in a chokehold. Lots of our guys simply just gone to the streets and start yelling at a lot of the Nazis, because we can't do much. The whole language set is painted against us. The king not only is being drugged, he's also believing this revelation exodus and believing that if the situation gets worse, it will heal better. Even for me, and I'm not even from Europe, helping out Europe would have been gone. Europe already is dead. There's no casino built. Is it because all the casino wonderfully just simply checked, I shouldn't build any casino, let's build shopping mall? It's not our guys making the shopping mall. Like, this stuff doesn't have to go through sort of literal check. It's quite common sense. Somebody even goes to restaurants and have still working what a proper health. This is why we notice a lot of persons don't believe in that and fault
fall to those hideous tricks. It's not really hideous tricks. It's like me telling my daughter, can you figure out I'm going to hang you tomorrow? Why would the daughter believe that? Why would the person morph, whether morph? Why would the entity, whether the character, whether also in character, and whether also another, whether also character, and whether also in character, believe into this stuff? And whether stop bothering with this whole stuff together, and along the way come up with words like we gotta find a fire wheel. This is a determined point. This is an ergon mill point. If my daughter walks through here, that means she has met a centenate, and centenate is not so similar to sentinel. It's nothing to do with whether not correlated with the sentinel in those movies. It doesn't have to be so much explaining on that. It's more fun to the sentinel there. But also amongst other words, there are first probable philosophy could be whether also amongst other words there. And when certain points and whether certain events go this way, make stuff up, make new words up, and assign definitions to it. Do as one please, and whether do as one choices in favor of until getting the daughter killed. I may be over patronizing, whether I may be a supreme lord or whether something, or whether I may be penalizing a lot of our guys, whether of certain groups there. It led to a confusing remark on whether, as if they very much that amount was their fault. It might be this was also a investigation towards building a better tomorrow, whether towards building a better tomorrow, or whether towards building a healthier, whether towards a peaceful era, whether towards building a better, more peaceful tomorrow, whether towards building a more peaceful weather, reason there whether towards building a better tomorrow. And it serves as this test, checking on if the words are as authentic they are, and language should be this way, therefore such, and this should be right. And once again, whether it doesn't have to be through this literal format thinking of sort of operates more of whether more of operates, and whether more of operates on whether operates more of on the whether operates more of the functionality level. If we're to proper to sort of if we're to minor literalization, mentioning it. This equality diversity could have been solved simply by folks retaining to beauty, leave it to some kind of sci-fi movies. This really didn't have to happen. It is much of self-assertiveness, lack of respect, lack of proper control, and it can't even manage itself properly. Yeah, the ones responsible and notice himself has done certain fault should probably be in remorse, whether in the state of regrets, and whether also remorse. Goes after Hitler, so I have to come up with a story. I'm Hitler second or something. Could it just be that suppose Hitler won, there wouldn't be a second Hitler? The situation would have been worse? Probably actually would be worse. I gotta admit, but I did not indicating that this is the absolute right out there. It's sort of on a probability chance, and whether it's worthy, and whether and whether it's worthy, and whether it's a whether a worthy consideration, and whether reason there another, and whether it's a worthy consideration of whether a worthy consideration, whether reason and whether of and whether reason there and whether reason there and whether of a worthy consideration of, and whether reason and whether of a worthy consideration. Because if for them and some of the related doings and degeneracy probably wouldn't gotten by the notice of the proportion. If we're for those which are technically whether sort of like buffs, whether sort of buffs, and then this whole planet would have been much more viciously hijacked. And it also might be me being we all have to sort of designate towards something into disregard, cannot let them really bother us too much, or whether just whether designate towards those out of sheer actions, or whether out of sheer, whether reason out of sheer, whether out of niceness.
it was also considerable as a accommodation from other reasons. Accommodation.
这个袜子啊，它短裤的时候穿那个球鞋会容易看不懂 ，OK？ 因为在上面呢，干嘛穿的不舒适啊？对，干什么？你是不是背不够了？背过来不背那很多。 你把那个门开开，你那个屁股啊，有很多屎，你最好把它们放到地下去。
重要人物这两个人不管，或者 whether 这个人不管，这个人 whether recent whether first of this entity of
Whether this entity.
tonnage of fuss out there daily every day, enfeeblement, reducive, attrition, grind, violism, poisonous, hideousness.
Earlier ago, I can be considerable amount ago, I mentioned about cooking some fugitives with Cormac, whether fugitives, and whether fugitives are alive, whether it will be their second, and whether also recent, and whether also it will be a second on that.
I did consider it might be a probable of extreme, whether probable of more out of, whether extreme for, whether extreme for whether of reason. And then I considered, wait a second, it's definitely not out of reason. That's the level needs to be, because there's so much anesthetic sprays. It's not like, and whether also it's not so much, it's not like, whether it's not as if it's unchangeable. Overall, the command should be given to me, the most qualified. There should be no arguments towards whether I'm going to be placing. That's the identity of a leech, whether a thief and someone that's been entirely drugged so much. If they don't want to progress, they shouldn't be sticking around and even speaking to our guys. And they must have never been visited a single palace, whether one of those shopping malls, so sort of whether it's in their modernity palaces. There are tons of those, co-shared with the remaining regular folks. Besides me, how many European fellows is out there? 5? 6? How is 5 going to revive Europe? Our forces are so, National Socialism is actually so pathetically weak that if nations don't help, if a lot of groups, whether governments together don't help, whether governments, whether reason there, for whether reason there, whether reason there, or whether if governments do not help towards National Socialism can easily get crumbled by degeneracies. Because even on the sort of a simpler model of deceived side versus more honest side, which would prevail? Suppose about 50-50. It's done for, because the deceived side already is a natural deceiver. It does things the much more less under noticeable. So have a balance on sort of noticeableness. They already won this place. And these are practically whether most are the spasm mantis, which the sort of the zoo kingdoms does not indicate of, and this makes things worse. Right? And these heavily exploited, notice when there's nothing of those there, doing these fiendish gestures.
The original formulating morph considered whether contains of
before there was this mention and another phrase, whether now considerable more suitable from whether there and whether might and whether also whether minor rather and whether whether just and whether also whether they're considerable for a bit change of whether a bit of change and whether a bit change thereof and whether a bit of change of whether recent there and whether before and whether another and whether a bit change of then whether it's predictable that whether that it's predictable whether it's attainable and whether there and whether there it's attainable or the original formulating having whether the original formulating whether the original and whether also and whether the original form and whether rather and whether rather and whether reason there and whether and rather the original version having the recent phrase there whether phrases and whether also statements there of considerable as similar to the original formulating of whether the original version at the initial instance of and whether the original formulating at the initial instance to of which on whether to of which and whether to of to probable to suitable for to could be of. It continues of a recent there of so to completing of whether considerable as completing of the whether and whether the end whether the end whether there should have then comes this and whether adopts to or whether goes along with whether they're instead of adopt and whether accommodates to and whether amongst other sort of phrases and whether other sort of whether other completion and whether other completion phrase of and whether other completed phrase of and whether also statements and whether also phrases and whether reason there and other complete and whether other completed phrase and whether reason there and whether other and whether phrase and whether phrases and whether statements of probable to each and whether to either and whether to either and whether and minor rather and whether to probable to could be of reason there and whether to probable of considerable as a bit over whether minor over it's in there and whether minor is over right there without be present so whether reason there and whether reason adjacent phrase and whether just and whether reason phrase there may not be of stress main phrase there or whether could be considered as moderate and whether just and whether reason there or whether reason there or whether reason thereof it's probably could be considered of minor remark thereof and whether reason as remark and whether minor remark thereof to of which or whether to of on which and whether to of which on and whether to of reason and whether to reason of and whether to of reason and whether just whether reason to of which and whether to of which on and whether to of to probable to suitable for whether to probable to could be of to probable of to also to could be of and whether to probable of to could be of reason there phrase of whether phrase is considered as minor remarks to probable of to could be of whether also whether at first of as minor remark whether minor remark of to probable to could be of whether recent probable of also could be of, and whether it's probable of could be of. A reason there of some of the fact whether reason there of minor remark there, whether minor remarks, and whether just and whether reason there and whether and rather as minor remark of probable to be of. And whether reason there as and whether minor remark of and whether as minor remark and whether there and whether as minor remark of and whether as minor remark and whether another and whether as minor remark of to probable so also to could be of and whether to probable to could be of and whether reason to probable for could be of and whether reason there and whether probable could be of and whether another and whether and minor rather and whether rather to probable of to could be of and whether reason and whether to probable to could be of.